She moved to the mountain cabin but didn't know the millionaire neighbor would fall in love. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We continue. The sound of car tires crunching on gravel announced the end of a long journey. Emily turned off the engine and remained seated for a few moments, observing the wooden cabin through the dust-stained windshield. The sun was beginning to set behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink that reflected in the foggy windows of the rustic structure. She took a deep breath, feeling the pure mountain air fill her lungs. The silence was almost palpable, broken only by the distant song of birds and the whisper of wind through the pine trees. This was exactly what she was looking for: solitude, peace, and the chance to reconnect with herself. Emily got out of the car and her feet sank slightly into the damp earth. The smell of wood and moss invaded her nostrils, bringing a familiar sense of comfort. She opened the trunk and began to remove her luggage. She had brought only the essentials for her season of self-exile. Among her belongings, an old camera caught her attention. The equipment, stored for years in a box at the back of her closet, was a tangible reminder of lighter times when photography was her way of seeing and interpreting the world. The cabin key was exactly where the owner had indicated, under a ceramic pot on the porch. When she opened the door, Emily was greeted by a cozy environment, albeit dusty. The evening light filtered through the faded curtains, revealing a simple room with rustic furniture. A sofa covered with a plaid blanket, a solid wood coffee table, and a fireplace that would be her main source of heat during the cold nights. While organizing her things, it began to rain. First, a gentle drizzle that soon turned into a persistent rain, creating a comforting melody on the roof. Emily lit some candles, still not fully trusting the old electrical installation, and prepared tea to warm her body and soul. Sitting by the window, watching the raindrops trickle down the glass, she allowed herself to relive the events that had brought her here. The previous year had been a test of emotional endurance, the end of a draining relationship, growing pressure at work, the suffocating feeling that her life had lost its direction. Each decision, each choice seemed to have taken her a little further from who she really was. A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by the rumble of thunder that made the windows tremble. Emily wrapped herself more tightly in the blanket she had found on the sofa, sensing the aroma of lavender emanating from the fabric. It was then that she noticed movement through the curtain of rain. A light turned on in a neighboring cabin that she hadn't noticed before. Curiosity made her approach the window. Through the curtain of water, she could only distinguish a male silhouette moving behind the illuminated windows. She hadn't expected to have neighbors so close. Solitude was, after all, what she sought. But something in that distant presence awakened a familiar restlessness in her chest. She decided to ignore the feeling and focus on setting up her new space. As she unpacked her belongings, she found a blank notebook she had bought especially for this occasion. In its empty pages, she planned to reconnect with her writing, another hobby abandoned over the years. On the first page, she wrote just one word: beginning. The night advanced, and the rain showed no signs of stopping. Emily prepared the bed with clean sheets she had brought, feeling the fatigue of the journey weighing on her shoulders. Before lying down, she looked out the window one last time. The light in the neighboring cabin was still on, and for a moment she had the impression that the silhouette was also observing her through the curtain of rain. Lying in bed, listening to the patter of rain on the roof, Emily allowed herself to smile for the first time in a long time. There, far from everything and everyone, she finally felt that she could breathe again. What she didn't know was that fate had prepared a surprise that would completely transform her search for inner peace. The morning arrived with a soft clarity filtering through the mist. Emily woke to the song of birds and the aroma of wet pine trees invading her room through the half-open window. Her muscles protested slightly when she got up. Sleeping in a different bed always required a period of adjustment. She prepared her breakfast calmly, savoring the luxury of not having schedules to meet. As the water boiled for coffee, she took her old camera and began to clean the lenses carefully. The equipment still worked perfectly, preserved by the care with which it had been stored all those years. She decided to take a walk to explore the surroundings of her new temporary home. The air was fresh, after the previous night's rain, and small puddles reflected the sky like natural mirrors. Emily began to photograph, at first timidly, then with growing enthusiasm. Each click of the shutter seemed to awaken a dormant part of her soul. It was, when she was framing a particularly beautiful ray of sunlight between the trees, that she heard footsteps approaching. Before she could turn around, a familiar voice, terribly familiar, froze her in place. "Emily?" The sound of that voice made her heart skip a beat. She lowered the camera slowly, trying to prepare herself for what she knew she would find when she turned around. Even so, when her eyes met Michael's, the impact was overwhelming. He was different from the young man in her memories, of course. The years had left their mark, slightly graying hair at the temples, more pronounced lines around the eyes. But that look remained the same, intense and penetrating as it had always been. "Michael," she managed to say, her voice firmer than she expected. "I didn't know you were here." "Nor did I imagine finding you here," he replied, a half smile appearing on his lips. "The cabin next to yours, it's mine." Emily felt the weight of that revelation. Her mysterious neighbor from the night before was precisely the last person she expected to find in this mountain refuge. Michael, her first love, the man who had left an indelible mark on her life, was there just a few meters away. "You look different," he commented, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "You too," she replied, noticing how he seemed more restrained, more lonely, perhaps. The successful businessman who occasionally appeared in the pages of business magazines seemed to have given way to a more introspective version of himself. "Still photographing," he observed, indicating the camera in her hands. "Actually, I just started again," Emily admitted, feeling an unexpected vulnerability in sharing that information. A stronger gust of wind shook the trees around them, causing some dewdrops to fall like gentle rain. The moment seemed suspended in time, loaded with unspoken words and unasked questions. "Would you like some coffee?" he suddenly asked. "I have an Italian machine that makes a decent espresso, even out here in the middle of nowhere." Emily hesitated. Part of her wanted to flee, to stay true to her original plan of isolation and self-healing. But there was something in the way Michael looked at her, a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, that made her nod. "Coffee would be nice," she replied, surprising herself. They walked side by side to his cabin, maintaining a safe distance between them. The silence between them was dense, filled with shared memories and divergent paths. Michael's cabin was larger than hers, but maintained the same rustic simplicity. Through the windows, Emily could see bookshelves full of books and a closed laptop on a desk. While Michael prepared the coffee, Emily discreetly observed the environment. It was then that her gaze caught something that made her heart race. On a partially hidden shelf, an old photograph in a simple frame. It was a photo of them, young and smiling, taken at a time when the future seemed like a blank canvas full of possibilities. "You kept it," she murmured, unable to contain the surprise in her voice. Michael stopped what he was doing, his eyes finding the photograph she was observing. For a moment it seemed he would say something, but he just nodded slightly, returning his attention to the coffee. The aroma of coffee filled the environment as Emily and Michael sat on opposite sides of a rustic table. The silence between them was punctuated only by the tinkling of cups and the soft crackling of wood in the fireplace. Through the window, heavy clouds announced another approaching storm. "So you abandoned everything to live in the mountains," Emily commented, trying to maintain a casual tone while her fingers played with the edge of the cup. Michael sketched an enigmatic smile. "I didn't exactly abandon everything. Let's say I'm redefining priorities. The company continues to function, but I decided I needed time to think." The famous CEO Michael Anderson needing time to think. Business magazines would have a field day with that information, she teased lightly, surprising herself with the ease with which she fell into a familiar pattern. of conversation with him. The magazines don't know much, he replied, his gaze becoming more intense. Just as they don't know that the young photographer who always accompanied me at corporate events was you. Emily felt her face heat up. It was true. In the first years after the separation, she had gotten some jobs photographing business events. More than once she had photographed Michael from a distance, protected by her camera lens, without him knowing it was her behind the equipment. It was just a job, she murmured, but they both knew there was more to that story. A distant thunder made the windows shudder. Michael got up to turn on more lights, and Emily noticed a pile of old newspapers carefully organized on a bookshelf. On the front page of one of them, a headline caught her attention. Anderson Empire under new direction. Youngest heir takes full control of business. It was after that article that I decided I needed a break, Michael commented, noticing her interest. The price of success began to seem too high. Emily nodded, understanding perfectly what he meant. Sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves again, she said, more to herself than to him. The silence that followed was interrupted by a metallic sound. Something had fallen from the shelf when Michael moved the newspapers. It was a small metal box, old and a bit rusty. From it, various newspaper clippings scattered across the floor. While helping to collect the papers, Emily froze when she recognized her own face in one of the clippings. It was a small note about a photography exhibition she had held years ago. In the photo, she smiled, young and confident, holding her camera. Next to this, there were other news items about her, small mentions in social columns, critiques of her exhibitions, even an article about a photography award she had won. You kept all this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Michael didn't respond immediately. He carefully took the clippings from her hands, storing them back in the box. "I never stopped following your life, Emily, even from a distance." The confession hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meanings. Emily felt her heart accelerate, fighting against a wave of emotions that threatened to overflow. The rain began to fall outside, first gentle, then with more intensity. "Why did you never—" she began, but her voice faltered. "Why did I never get in touch?" he completed, his gaze fixed on the rain through the window. "Because sometimes life's timing doesn't work with us. When I finally had the courage to look for you again, I found out you were engaged." Emily felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. Her engagement to Richard, which had ended less than a year ago, had been a mistake from the beginning. A desperate attempt to move on, to build something stable after years of superficial relationships. "That was a mistake," she admitted, surprising herself with her honesty. "One of many I made trying to escape the past." Michael turned to her, his eyes carrying an intensity that made Emily shiver. "And now are you still running?" Before she could answer, an intense flash illuminated the entire cabin, followed by a deafening thunderclap. The lights flickered and went out, leaving them in semi-darkness, illuminated only by the fireplace. In the sudden darkness, the contours of the furniture danced with shadows projected by the fireplace fire. Emily remained motionless, aware of Michael's presence. A few steps away, the sound of rain intensified outside, creating a liquid curtain that isolated them from the rest of the world. "I think I'll need candles," Michael commented, his voice sounding closer than Emily expected. She heard him move around the cabin, opening drawers and cabinets. "Let me help," she offered, standing up. Her eyes were already beginning to adapt to the semi-darkness, and she could distinguish his silhouette near an old cabinet. As they searched for candles, their fingers accidentally touched on a wooden surface. The contact, though brief, sent an electric current through Emily's body. She instinctively recoiled, dropping something that made a dull noise as it hit the floor. "Wait, let me see what fell," Michael said, bending down. "It's an old box. I didn't know it was still here." In the flickering light of the fireplace, Emily saw Michael examine an engraved wooden box, his hands passing over the details of the object with a familiarity that suggested recognition. "This belonged to the former owners of the cabin," he explained, his voice carrying a note of nostalgia. "I found it when I bought the place but never had the courage to open it." Emily sat down next to him on the floor, curious. Why not? Because sometimes it's better to leave the past in peace, he replied, but his hands were already working on the rusty lock. The box opened with a soft creak, revealing its contents. Old letters, yellowed photographs, and a diary with a leather cover. Emily carefully picked up one of the photographs. It showed a young couple in front of the cabin, probably decades ago. Their radiant smiles contrasted with the simplicity of the setting. "Look at this," Michael murmured, holding the diary. The pages were filled with a delicate and regular calligraphy. It's dated 1962. Emily moved closer to read, and the movement caused their shoulders to touch. Neither moved away. In the flickering light of the fire, they began to read the first entry. "Dear Diary, today we arrived at the cabin. Thomas says it's crazy to abandon everything for the uncertainty of these mountains, but for the first time in years, I feel truly free. The air here tastes of possibilities." The words transported them to another time, another love story and new beginnings. Emily felt a lump in her throat as she realized the parallels with her own situation. The woman in the diary, like her, had sought the mountains in search of a new beginning. She was a photographer too, Michael commented, turning some pages. Between them, old negatives had been carefully preserved. Look at the notes about light and composition in the margins. The storm raged outside, but inside the cabin time seemed to have stopped. Emily and Michael continued reading, their heads close together, sharing those fragments of a love story from the past. The diary spoke of difficult choices, of courage to start over, of love found in the most unexpected places. "How do you think their story ended?" Emily asked softly, closing the diary after reading several pages. "Maybe some stories don't need to end," Michael replied, his gaze meeting hers in the semi-darkness. "Maybe they just continue in different ways." A lightning bolt illuminated the environment for an instant, revealing the proximity between them. Emily could feel the heat of Michael's body, hear his soft breathing. The air seemed charged with electricity that had nothing to do with the storm. "I should go," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "It's getting late." "It's raining too hard," Michael observed, genuine concern in his voice. "Maybe it's better to wait for the storm to pass." As if to emphasize his words, a particularly strong thunderclap shook the cabin windows. Emily involuntarily shuddered, and Michael, in an automatic gesture, placed his hand over hers. The touch of Michael's hand on hers provoked an avalanche of memories in Emily. She remembered the first time he held her hand, so many years ago, during a photography exhibition in college. At the time, she was just a student passionate about art, and he was a young businessman beginning to take over the family business. "Do you remember that exhibition?" she asked, her voice almost inaudible over the sound of the rain. "The first time we met?" Michael smiled in the dark, and even with little light, Emily could see the nostalgic gleam in his eyes. "How could I forget? You were explaining the theory behind a black and white photograph. You were talking about how shadows were as important as light. And you were the only one who stopped to really listen," she completed, allowing herself to smile at the memory. "All the other visitors walked right past, but you stayed there asking questions, genuinely interested." A distant thunder reverberated through the cabin, making the windows tremble. Emily stood up, walking to the window to observe the storm. The rain fell in dense curtains, transforming the landscape into an indistinct blur. "You know what else?" "I remember from that night," Michael said, joining her near the window, "how your eyes shone when you talked about photography. It was as if you had discovered all the secrets of the universe through that lens." Emily felt a tightness in her chest. For years after the separation, she had put away her camera, as if photographing was something that exclusively belonged to that period of her life. "I lost that somewhere along the way," she admitted. "Not just photography, but that enthusiasm, that certainty that I was on the right path." "And now?" Michael asked softly. "What are you looking for here in the mountains?" Before Emily could answer, a noise coming from the attic caught her attention. It was as if something had fallen. "Must be the wind," Michael commented, taking a flashlight from a nearby drawer. "But it's better to check. Want to come with me?" Emily nodded, following him to the stairs that led to the attic. The beam of light from the flashlight danced on the walls, creating mysterious shadows. The attic was a spacious area, covered in dust and full of objects covered by white sheets. "I had never come up here," Michael confessed, moving the flashlight beam around the environment. "When I bought the cabin, I left everything as it was." An object partially covered by a dusty sheet caught Emily's attention. As she approached, she realized it was an old easel, and on it, a covered canvas. Carefully, she removed the fabric, revealing a painting that made her heart leap. It was an almost exact reproduction of the view from the cabin's porch, but decades older. "It's the same artist from the diary," Emily whispered, noticing the signature in the lower corner of the canvas. "Sarah Montgomery, 1962. As they examined the painting, other objects began to tell their own story. There were more canvases, framed photographs, letters yellowed by time. It was as if the attic not only stored objects, but fragments of intensely lived lives. "Look at this," Michael called, holding an old envelope. Inside it, a letter dated 1963 began with words that made Emily catch her breath. "My love, if this letter reaches you." The flashlight trembled slightly in Michael's hands as he read aloud. "Know that every decision I made was thinking of us. The world out there may not understand our choices, but here in the mountains, I found the courage I never had in the city. Sometimes you need to lose everything to find what really matters." Emily felt tears forming in her eyes. Sarah's words, written so many decades ago, seemed to echo her own feelings, her own internal battles. When she raised her gaze, she found Michael observing her with an intensity that made her heart race. "It's amazing how some stories seem to repeat themselves," he murmured, taking a step in her direction. In the confined space of the attic, illuminated only by the flickering light of the flashlight, the outside world seemed to have completely disappeared. The silence in the attic was broken only by the muffled sound of rain on the roof and their breathing. Emily held Sarah's letter with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the history that those words carried. Michael remained close, his body heat a constant presence that she could not ignore. "There are more letters," he said, moving. The flashlight beamed to a small engraved wooden box. Inside it, dozens of envelopes organized by date told the story of Sarah and Thomas through the years. Emily picked up one of the most recent letters, dated 1980. "My love, after all these years, I look out the window and see the same mountains that brought us here. Each dawn reminds me why we chose this path, why we decided to trust what we felt." "They stayed together," Emily whispered, a mixture of admiration and melancholy in her voice. "Despite everything, they found a way. Not all stories need to end in separation," Michael responded softly, his voice laden with meaning. A lightning bolt illuminated the attic through the small circular window, revealing for an instant Michael's features with crystal clarity. Emily saw in him not just the successful businessman that the magazines portrayed, but also the idealistic young man she had met years ago. "Why did you never tell me about the letter?" she suddenly asked, the question escaping before she could contain it. Michael tensed for a moment. "What letter?" "The one you mentioned having written. Earlier you said you had written me a letter years ago." The silence that followed was heavy. Michael looked away, moving closer to the attic window. The rain continued to fall heavily, creating hypnotic patterns on the foggy glass. "It was an explanation," he finally answered, his voice low but firm. "About why I had to leave that way. About the family pressure, the veiled threats of disinheritance if I didn't immediately take over the business. About how I thought I was protecting you by staying away." Emily felt her heart tighten. "But I never received that letter. I know, I discovered that years later when I met Sophie at a charity event." The name made Emily freeze. Sophie had been her best friend at the time, her confidant during the most difficult period after Michael's departure. "Sophie?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "What does she have to do with this?" Michael turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the flashlight's beam. "She confessed, after a few glasses of champagne, that she intercepted the letter. She said she was protecting you, that I wasn't good enough for you, that you deserved someone who would choose you above everything else. Emily felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Memories of Sophie consoling her, feeding her anger and disappointment with Michael, began to make a terrible kind of sense. She needed to support herself on an old dresser to maintain her balance. "All these years," she murmured, her voice choked. "All these years I thought you had simply gone away without looking back." "And I thought you had read the letter and decided it wasn't worth waiting," Michael replied, taking a step in her direction. "That you had chosen to move on without looking back." The revelation hung between them like a dense cloud, charged, with lost possibilities and untrodden paths. Outside, the storm was beginning to diminish, but inside the attic, a different storm was just beginning. The rest of the night passed like a blur for Emily. After the revelations in the attic, she had returned to her cabin in a state of emotional numbness, barely registering the rain that was still falling gently. Sleep did not come easily, and when she finally dozed off, her dreams were populated by fragments of the past, mixed with the words from Sarah's letters. Dawn brought with it a clear sky and a clarity that seemed almost painful. Emily got up early, her thoughts still a confused whirlwind of emotions and questions. She took her camera and went out to photograph, hoping that the familiar act could help her organize her thoughts. The air was fresh after the storm, and small dewdrops shone like diamonds on the vegetation. As she walked, each click of the shutter seemed to capture not only images, but also fragments of her own story that needed to be re-examined in this new light. It was when she reached a small clearing that she found something unexpected. An old rusted mailbox, half hidden among the trees. It seemed to have been forgotten there for decades, covered with moss and partially tilted. Carefully, she opened the rusty little door. Inside, protected from humidity by a plastic envelope already yellowed by time, was a stack of letters. Her heart accelerated as she recognized Sarah Montgomery's elegant handwriting. There were more letters, apparently never delivered, all addressed to Thomas. With trembling hands, Emily opened the first letter. "My dear Thomas, I leave these letters here, our secret place, because I know that one day you will come looking for them. Each word I wrote carries with it a piece of my heart, a truth that the world out there may never understand." Emily sat on a fallen log nearby, absorbed in the reading. The letters revealed a love story that painfully echoed her own experience. Misunderstandings, external interferences, difficult choices. Sarah wrote about her fears, her hopes, her unwavering faith in the love they shared. "What did you find?" Michael's voice startled her. He was standing at the entrance to the clearing, observing her with a curious expression. "More letters from Sarah," Emily replied, holding up the envelopes. "In an old mailbox. It seems this was a special place for them." Michael approached, sitting beside her on the log. The warmth of his presence was simultaneously comforting and disturbing. "You always had a gift for finding hidden stories," he commented, a slight smile on his lips. "Unlike you, who always preferred to hide yours," she replied, surprising herself, with the hint of bitterness in her voice. Michael's smile disappeared. "Emily," he began, but she interrupted him. "Why didn't you try to find me afterward? After discovering about Sophie and the letter, why didn't you come looking for me?" The question hung between them, heavy as the storm clouds from the night before. Michael remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "Because when I discovered the truth, you were already building your life with someone else," he finally answered. "I saw the photos of your engagement on social media. You seemed happy. Who was I to reappear and possibly destroy that?" Emily let out a humorless laugh. "Happy? I was desperately trying to convince myself that was what I wanted. A safe, predictable relationship, without surprises or great emotions. Exactly the opposite of what we had." "And now?" Michael asked, his voice soft but intense. "What do you want now?" Emily looked at the letters in her hands, thinking of Sarah and Thomas, of all the love stories that needed to fight against time and circumstances to survive. When she raised her eyes to Michael, She saw in him not only the past they shared, but also all the possibilities they had not yet explored. The moment was interrupted by the shrill sound of a cell phone. Michael closed his eyes for an instant, an expression of frustration crossing his face before he took the device from his pocket. "It's the company," he said, after checking the screen. "I need to answer." Emily nodded, watching him walk away, among the trees as he spoke on the phone. His posture had changed completely, shoulders more tense, voice firmer and more professional. It was like watching a transformation, from the Michael she knew to the businessman the world expected him to be. She took advantage of the moment alone to continue exploring Sarah's letters. One in particular caught her attention. It was dated exactly 1 year after the first one they had found. "Thomas, my love, today marks 1 year since we chose this place as our refuge. People in the city don't understand why I abandoned my promising career as an artist to live in the mountains. They say I'm wasting my talent. But they don't see what I see through my lenses. True beauty lies in the courage to choose your own path, even when everyone says you're making a mistake." The sound of approaching footsteps made Emily look up. Michael was returning, but his expression was different, worried. "Problems?" she asked, although she already knew the answer. "The board is pushing for important changes," he replied, running, his hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "They want me to return to the city immediately for a series of crucial meetings." Emily felt her heart tighten. It was as if the real world was brutally invading the bubble of peace they had built in the mountains. "When do you need to leave?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "The company helicopter is on its way. It arrives in a few hours." Michael sat down again at her side, picking up one of Sarah's letters. "You know what's ironic? I came here seeking to escape exactly this kind of pressure, and found more than you expected," Emily completed softly. "Much more," he agreed, his eyes meeting hers. "Emily, No," she interrupted him gently. "Don't say anything now, not when you're about to leave again." Michael took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "It's not like last time," he insisted. "I will return if you want me to return." Emily looked at their joined hands, thinking of all the lost years, all the misunderstandings that had separated them. "How can I be sure?" she whispered. In response, Michael took something from his jacket pocket. It was an old key, probably, to the cabin. "Keep it," he said. "Not just the key to the cabin, but also the promise that I'll return as soon as I resolve this situation." "And after?" Emily asked, accepting the key. "What happens when you return?" "After," he replied, a small smile forming on his lips, "we can try to discover if some stories deserve a second chance." The distant sound of a helicopter began to echo among the mountains. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the key in her hand and the warmth of Michael's presence beside her. When she opened them again, a decision was beginning to form in her mind, one that could change everything. The noise of the helicopter dissipated on the horizon, leaving Emily alone with the silence of the mountains and the weight of unspoken words. In her hands, the key to Michael's cabin seemed to burn, a tangible reminder of promises and possibilities. She returned to his cabin, now empty, but still impregnated with his presence. On the kitchen table, the half-empty coffee cup told the story of a hasty departure. Emily walked through the space, her fingers sliding over the furniture, absorbing every detail she had not noticed before. It was when her gaze fell upon a closed laptop on top of the desk. Next to it, a yellow post-it with a password hastily scribbled, "Emily Mountain 2024. Her heart leaped when she realized that even his password carried her name. With trembling hands, she turned on the computer. On the desktop, a folder immediately caught her attention, Rebirth Project. Inside it, she found dozens of documents detailing plans to transform the region into a center for artistic retreats, with photography studios, workshops, and spaces for exhibitions. "So this is what you were planning," she murmured to the silence of the cabin as she examined the documents. The plans were meticulous, including the preservation of local nature and community involvement. In one of the files, she found a personal note. "Perhaps it's crazy to build all this in the hope that one day our paths will cross again, but if I've learned anything with time. It's that some dreams deserve the risk. Emily closed the laptop, feeling overwhelmed by the discoveries. She needed air. She took her camera and went out for a walk, letting her feet guide her while her mind processed everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. The afternoon sun painted the mountains with golden tones, creating a perfect scenario for photography. Emily allowed herself to get lost in her craft, capturing images that told not only the story of the landscape, but also of her own emotional journey. It was during this walk that she found something intriguing. An old trail almost hidden by vegetation. Following it, she reached a small stone building partially covered by ivy. It was an old photography studio, judging by the vintage equipment abandoned inside. It can't be a coincidence, she thought, exploring the space. On the walls, faded, photographs showed the region decades ago. In one of them, she recognized Sarah Montgomery, smiling beside her photographic equipment, with the same mountains in the background that Emily had just photographed. In a corner, she found an old chest. Inside it, besides well-preserved photographic equipment, there was an envelope addressed to whoever finds this place. Carefully, Emily opened the letter yellowed by time. Dear traveler, if you found this place, it was not by chance. This studio was my refuge, my sacred space where I could be truly myself. Here I learned that art is not just about capturing images, but about preserving moments of truth. To the photographer who finds this space, it is now yours. Use it wisely. And remember, sometimes we need to get lost to discover who we really are. With love, Sarah Montgomery. Emily sat on the dusty floor of the studio, silent tears running down her face. It was as if Sarah had left that message especially for her, crossing decades to offer exactly the words she needed to hear. She took out her cell phone, fingers hovering over Michael's number. There was so much she wanted to tell him, so many discoveries to share. But something made her hesitate. Some revelations, she thought, deserved more than a simple phone call. The following days passed at a different rhythm for Emily. Sarah's old studio became her refuge, a space where she spent hours cleaning, organizing, and mainly photographing. The vintage equipment, after careful restoration, still worked perfectly, allowing her to experiment with old photography techniques. One morning, while developing some photos in the small improvised laboratory she had set up, Emily received an unexpected message. It was from Julia, her former editor at the photography magazine where she had worked. Emily, I need to talk to you urgently. Your old photos of Michael Anderson are circulating on the internet and causing a stir. Apparently, someone hacked your old online portfolio and leaked the images. The press is speculating about you two. With trembling hands, Emily opened the news sites. There they were, photographs she had taken of Michael years ago during corporate events. Photos that captured not just the successful businessman, but moments of vulnerability, lost looks, genuine smiles that she was able to capture, precisely because she knew him so well. The headlines speculated about the relationship between the famous businessman and the mysterious photographer. Some publications had already discovered her identity and traced her history to the present, including her sudden move to the mountains. Anderson Empire in transformation. CEO abandons crucial meeting and isolates himself in the mountains. The secret love of businessman Michael Anderson. The story behind the photographs. Emily Winters, the photographer who captured more than the images. As she read the reports, her cell phone wouldn't stop ringing. Old friendships, work colleagues, even Sophie tried to make contact. Emily ignored all the calls, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden exposure. It was then that she found an email from Michael. Emily, I imagine you've already seen the news. Don't worry about the exposure of the photos. In fact, they made me realize something important. In each image you captured, I see not only who I was, but who I always wanted to be. You saw through the masks I wore, long before I could do it myself. The meeting with the board wasn't about business. It was about changes. Changes I've been planning for months since I bought the cabin. The Rebirth project isn't just a dream. It's my answer to years living a life that wasn't truly mine. I made a decision that will shock many people. I'm stepping away from the group's presidency. It's not an end, but a transformation. I want to create something meaningful here in the mountains, something that unites art and nature, that allows other people to find their own path to truth. But before announcing anything publicly, I need to know, what is your truth, Emily? What do you really want? I'll be back in 3 days. The decision about what happens next is yours. Michael. Emily read the email several times, each word reverberating in her heart. She looked around Sarah's studio, at the photographs she had taken in the last few days, at the plans she was beginning to form in her mind for that space. She took her camera and left the studio, walking until she found the perfect spot with a view of the mountains. The sun was beginning to set, creating a spectacle of colors in the sky. As she photographed, she realized she already knew her answer. In fact, perhaps she had always known. Sarah's studio had been transformed in the last few days. Emily dedicated every free moment to its restoration, cleaning windows fogged by time, organizing old equipment, creating a space that blended vintage charm with contemporary possibilities. Every corner told a story. The marks on the wall where Sarah used to hang her photos, handwritten notes about lighting techniques, small details that had survived time. In the midst of reorganization, Emily discovered a trapdoor hidden under a worn rug. Inside, she found a collection of photographic albums carefully preserved. The images told the story of the region through the decades, the first families who settled there, the construction of the cabins, community celebrations, the evolution of the landscape. Sarah wasn't just a photographer, Emily murmured to herself, leafing through the albums. She was the keeper of this place's memory. The discovery awakened something in Emily. Using her laptop, she began to create a project that united past and present. She digitized Sarah's old photos, interspersing them with her own images of the region, creating a visual narrative that crossed time. The work kept her focused, helping her to process not only her emotions, but also the growing media attention. It was during one of these digitization sessions that she received a call from Julia, her former editor. Emily, you need to see this. Your story has gone viral in an unexpected way. It's not just gossip or speculation. People are truly touched by the love story your photographs tell. What love story? Emily asked, confused. The one that's between the lines of every photo you took of him. The way you captured him. It's as if each image was an unsent love letter. And now, with him abandoning everything to live in the mountains, well, you've accidentally created the romantic story of the year. Emily hung up the phone, feeling simultaneously exposed and validated. Her photographs, which had always been her most honest form of expression, had revealed to the world a love that she herself had tried to deny for so long. That night, while organizing an improvised exhibition in the studio with her new photos, Emily received an unexpected message. It was from Sophie. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. What I did years ago, I thought I was protecting you, but I was actually projecting my own fears onto you. Seeing your photos now, the way you always saw him, I realized how much harm I caused. I'm sorry, Emily, truly sorry. Emily read the message several times, feeling the weight of years of hurt and misunderstandings begin to dissipate. She took her camera and went out to the studio porch where the sunset was painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. As she photographed, she thought about how light always revealed the truth of things, how Sarah had used her art to preserve not just images, but emotions, stories, moments of transformation, how her own photographs had unconsciously documented her love story with Michael, even when she tried to deny it. The sound of a car approaching caught her attention. Her heart raced as she recognized the vehicle. It was the same one she used to see parked at Michael's company years ago, when she photographed corporate events. But now, the moment was different. The light was different. Everything was different. Michael was returning 2 days earlier than expected. And Emily, with her camera in hand and her heart beating fast, finally knew exactly what she wanted to photograph. The car parked in front of the studio, and for a moment, no one moved. Emily kept the camera raised, capturing the exact instant when Michael got out of the vehicle, his silhouette cut against the flaming sunset sky. He looked different, not just for the casual clothes that replaced the usual suits, but for something in his posture, a lightness she had never seen before. "You found Sarah's studio," he said, not as a question, but as an amazed observation, noticing the changes Emily had made to the space. "Actually, I think it found me," she replied, lowering the camera. "How did you know of its existence?" Michael smiled, climbing the porch steps. "It's in the Rebirth Project plans. Sarah left documents about this place in the property records. I just didn't know exactly where it was, or that you would find it first." Emily led him inside the studio, where her improvised exhibition covered the walls. Sarah's old photographs were mixed with her recent images, creating a visual dialogue across time. Michael stopped in front of a particular series. They were the photos she had taken of him over the years, now revealed in large format. "So, this is how you always saw me," he murmured, studying the images with intensity. "This is how you always were," Emily responded softly. "Behind the expensive suits and board meetings, this is the real Michael I knew, the one who loved art and had dreams bigger than that office on the top floor." Michael turned to her, his eyes shining with contained emotion. "You know why I came back early? The board finally accepted my proposal. The Rebirth Project was approved, but with one condition." "Which one?" Emily asked, her heart accelerating. "They want it to be a joint project. Not just a center for artistic retreats, but a space that unites art and environmental preservation. And they saw your photographs, Emily. The way you capture the essence of this place. They want you as the artistic director of the project." Emily felt the world spin for a moment. "But what about the unauthorized exposure of the photos, the invasion of privacy?" Michael laughed softly. "That was the work of Julia, your former editor. She found the photos in an old backup and realized it was the perfect story to launch the project. She was just waiting for the right moment." "Julia, but—" Emily stopped, remembering her ex-editor's insistent messages in the last few days. "She knew about the project?" "She was one of the first people I consulted when I started planning all this," Michael admitted. "In fact, it was she who told me that you had moved away from photography, that you were looking for a fresh start, and when she found out you had come to the mountains—" "You didn't seem surprised to find me here," Emily realized, the pieces of the puzzle finally fitting together. "Let's say I had hope," he replied, taking a step in her direction. "But none of this matters if it's not what you want. This is your decision, Emily. No pressure, no expectations, just the truth." Emily walked to one of the studio windows, observing the mountains she now knew so well. She thought of Sarah and her photographs, of how she had chosen this same place to build her life. She thought of the diary, the hidden letters, the love stories that had survived time. When she turned to Michael, she had her camera in her hands. Again. "You know what's the most important part of photography?" she asked, framing him against the golden light of late afternoon. "It's not capturing the perfect moment, it's knowing when to press the button." The click of the camera echoed through the studio, capturing the exact moment when the last ray of sunlight illuminated Michael's face. Emily lowered the equipment slowly, knowing that this photograph would be different from all the others she had taken of him. It was no longer a record of the past, but a promise of the future. "I want to show you something," she said, moving to an area of the studio she had specially organized in the last few days. On an old table, she had arranged all the documents and photographs she had found about the history of the place, including the original plans of the studio drawn by Sarah herself. "Sarah didn't just create a photographic studio," Emily explained, showing the documents to Michael. "She had a bigger vision. She wanted to create a space where art and nature could coexist, where people could reconnect with their creativity away from urban chaos." Michael examined the papers with growing interest. "Kasi, exactly like the Rebirth Project," he murmured, amazed at the coincidences. "They're not coincidences," Emily smiled, picking up a yellowed envelope. "I found this letter addressed to the future owners of the land. Sarah wrote about her vision for this place, about how she hoped that one day someone would continue her legacy. She believed that art had the power to transform lives. While Michael read the letter, Emily continued, "In the last few days, I've thought a lot about new beginnings, about how sometimes we need to lose something to find something greater. Sarah understood this decades ago, and now somehow her dream has found an echo in us." "Emily," Michael began, but she raised her hand, asking to continue. "Let me finish," she asked softly. "When I came to the mountains, I was running away, from pressure, from expectations, from myself. But here, between these old walls and these stories preserved in time, I found much more than a refuge. I found a purpose." Moving around the studio, Emily began to show the transformations she had planned. "We can expand the space while maintaining its historical essence. Create workshops for analog and digital photography, artistic residencies, environmental documentation programs. Not just a retreat center, but a true creative laboratory in harmony with nature." Her eyes sparkled as she shared her vision, and Michael observed her with a growing smile, recognizing in her the same passion that had made him fall in love years. "And there's more," she continued, walking to a wall where she had mounted a mural with recent photographs. "In the last few days, I've been photographing the families who live in the surroundings, documenting their stories, their traditions. There's a rich community here, Michael. People who are part of this land for generations. Any project we do needs to include them, needs to respect and celebrate their connection to this place." Michael approached the mural, studying the images that showed smiling faces, hands calloused by work, looks that told stories of generations. "You've already started," he said softly. "In a few days, you've already captured the essence of what I dreamed for this place." Emily felt her heart accelerate with his proximity. Maybe it's because we always shared the same vision, even when we didn't know it, even when life took us on different paths. The sun had completely set now, and the golden light was replaced by the soft luminosity of the old studio lamps. In the silence that followed, time seemed suspended, as if the universe itself was waiting for the next word, the next gesture. Michael approached one of the photographs on the mural, a particularly touching image of an elderly man teaching his granddaughter to plant pine seedlings. "You know what impresses me most about your photographs?" he asked, his voice soft in the half-light of the studio. "It's not just the technique or the composition, it's how you manage to capture hope in each frame." Emily joined him in front of the mural, feeling the warmth of his presence. "I learned that from Sarah," she replied. In her diaries, she always talked about how photography is not just about capturing the present, but about preserving possibilities. Each image is an open door to the future. "Like us," Michael commented, turning to face her. "We've always been an unrealized possibility, haven't we? Even during all these years apart, even when we tried to move on, there was always this feeling of something unfinished." Emily felt her throat tighten with emotion. "That's why we need to do differently this time," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her heart. "I don't just want to pick up where we left off. I want to build something new, something bigger than the two of us." Michael smiled, taking her hand. "That's exactly why the board was so impressed with your leaked photographs. They weren't just images of a CEO at corporate events. They were proof that you always saw beyond appearances, always saw the potential for transformation." "So," Emily hesitated, intertwining her fingers with his, "how do we do this? How do we unite our dreams without repeating the mistakes of the past?" In response, Michael led her to her work table, where plans and projects were spread out. "First, we need to be completely honest with each other about our fears, our expectations, our limits." Emily nodded, picking up one of the sketches of the Rebirth project. "And we need to maintain our independence. I don't want to be just the photographer of your project, Michael. I want to be an equal partner, with an active voice in decisions." "I never expected less from you," he smiled. "In fact, I've already included a clause in the contract guaranteeing your total creative autonomy. Sarah's studio will be your domain, to develop as you see fit." "And the company?" Emily asked, concern evident in her voice. "I don't want you to abandon something you built with so much effort." Michael released her hand to pick up a document. From his folder, Here's the agreement I made with the board. I'll continue as chairman of the board, but I'll delegate daily management to a trusted team. My focus will be developing this project, transforming these mountains into a place where art and sustainability can flourish together. Emily examined the document, impressed with the clarity and determination with which Michael had planned every detail. It was a bold plan that united environmental preservation, sustainable development, and artistic expression. "There's one more thing," she said, walking to her bag and removing an envelope. "While you were away, I made some contacts. Several renowned photographers and artists have already shown interest in participating in the project. They want to teach workshops, do artistic residencies, contribute with their experiences." Michael's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "So you were already planning to accept?" "I was planning to propose," she corrected with a smile. "Even if you hadn't come back with this proposal, I would have suggested something similar. Because for the first time in a long time, I know exactly where I want to be and what I want to build." The following weeks brought a new routine to the mountains. Sarah's old studio came to life with the sound of animated voices, the click of cameras, and the dragging of furniture being reorganized. Emily coordinated the restoration with an almost reverential care, ensuring that each change respected the history of the place. A particularly sunny morning found Emily and Michael sitting on the studio porch, steaming cups of coffee in hand as they reviewed the latest details of the project. The first phase of renovations was almost complete, and the space was already beginning to take the form they had dreamed of. "Look at this," Emily said, showing Michael her laptop. "I received 3 more proposals from artists interested in our first season of residencies. One of them is Marina Sanders, that documentary photographer who follows traditional communities." Michael examined the portfolios with interest. Perfect for what we're planning. She could help document the stories of local families. The sound of footsteps on the porch stairs interrupted the conversation. It was Mrs. Betty, one of the oldest residents of the region, carrying a basket covered by an embroidered cloth. "I brought breakfast for you two," she announced with a warm smile. "You work so hard that sometimes you forget to eat properly." Emily smiled, making space on the table for the basket. In the last few days, the local community had become an integral part of the project. They weren't just subjects to be photographed, but active participants in the construction of that dream. "Mrs. Betty," Emily called as the lady prepared to leave, "I found some old photographs of the 4th of July celebration they used to have. Here? What do you think about reviving the tradition this year? We could use the studio space and the gardens." The lady's eyes brightened with the suggestion. "That would be wonderful, my dear. It's been years since we celebrated like in the old days. I'll talk to the other families." After Mrs. Betty left, Michael observed Emily with a soft smile. "You have a special gift for connecting people," he commented. "It's as if you always know exactly how to make everyone feel part of something bigger." Emily blushed slightly at the compliment. "I learned that from Sarah, actually." In her diaries, there are several stories about how she used photography to unite the community. It wasn't just about taking photos, it was about creating shared memories. A group of birds flew over their heads, and Emily instinctively picked up her camera to capture the moment. As she lowered it, she realized that Michael was observing her with an intensity that made her heart race. "What is it?" she asked. "I was thinking about how different you look now," he replied. "Lighter, more yourself." Emily reflected on his words. It was true. In the last few days, she had recovered not only her passion for photography, but also a part of herself that she thought she had lost. "It's because I finally understood something," she said, turning to face him. "All these years, I thought I had to choose between love and career, between personal dreams and commitments. But here in this place, with this project, I discovered that it's possible to have it all, as long as it's honest and true." Michael took her hand on the table, their fingers intertwining naturally. "And that's why it will work this time," he said softly. "Because we're no longer trying to be what others expect of us. We're just being who we really are." The morning. Sun bathed the porch with a golden light, and Emily couldn't help but think about how that moment seemed like a perfect photograph. not because it was meticulously composed, but because it was genuinely real. "You know what else I found in Sarah's diaries?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. "She wrote that sometimes the best moments are those we don't plan to photograph. They're the moments we simply live." The FI project advanced rapidly, transforming not only the physical space, but also the dynamics of the region. The news of the artistic center in the mountains had spread, attracting interest from everywhere. However, Emily and Michael remained faithful to their original vision, a place that preserved authenticity and connection with nature. One afternoon, while Emily was organizing a series of photographs for the first exhibition of the space, she received an unexpected visit. Sophie was standing at the door of the studio, nervous and visibly emotional. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. Emily felt a lump in her throat, but nodded. Sophie walked through the studio, observing the photographs on the walls with teary eyes. "It's amazing what you're creating here," she finally said. "So, the kind of thing I always knew you would be capable of doing." "Sophie," Emily began, but her former friend interrupted her. "No, please, let me speak," Sophie asked. "I spent years convincing myself that I had done the right thing, by hiding that letter, that I was protecting you. But in reality, I was projecting my own fears, my own insecurities. Seeing you now, so fulfilled, so at peace, made me realize how selfish I was." Emily observed the woman in front of her, no longer the friend who had betrayed her trust, but someone who also carried her own regrets. "You know what I learned in the last few months," Emily said softly. "That sometimes we need to forgive, not only others but also ourselves. The past cannot be changed, but it can be understood." Sophie wiped a tear that was running down her face. "You were always better than me at seeing the good side of things," she smiled sadly. "Do you think one day we can try to rebuild our friendship?" "One day at a time," Emily responded honestly. "Like these photographs, some need time to fully develop." Michael arrived later that day, finding Emily sitting in the studio garden, thoughtful. "Sophie was here," she told him when he sat down beside her. "And how was it?" he asked, evident concern in his voice. "Different from what I expected," Emily admitted. "I realized that holding on to resentment was only preventing me from moving forward completely. Forgiving her was like developing a photo that had been stuck in the negative for a long time." Michael smiled at the analogy. "You always had this ability to transform experiences into images," he commented, taking her hand. "It's because photography taught me to see beauty even in difficult moments," she replied. "Like now, we're building something new on the foundations of a complicated past, but that only makes everything more meaningful." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden, the preparations for the 4th of July celebration that Mrs. Betty was organizing were already taking shape. Colorful streamers danced in the gentle breeze, and the smell of wildflowers filled the air. "Tomorrow the first resident artists arrive," Michael commented, changing the subject. "Nervous?" Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "Anxious, but in a good way. It's like that feeling before pressing the camera button. You know something special is about to happen." "Something special is already happening," he replied softly, kissing the top of her head. The night of the 4th of July celebration arrived, transforming the space around the studio into a magical setting. Colorful streamers crossed the starry sky. Paper lanterns swayed softly in the night breeze, and the aroma of typical treats filled the air. The entire community had gathered to celebrate not only the festive date, but also the rebirth of that special place. Emily circulated among the guests with her camera, capturing moments of genuine joy. Children running with balloons, couples dancing to the sound of traditional music, Mrs. Betty teaching old recipes to the young resident artists who had arrived during the week. "This is exactly as Sarah described in her diary," she commented to Michael, showing him a passage she had marked. The summer celebrations in the mountains with the whole community gathered, celebrating life and art together. Michael smiled, observing the scene around them. The first resident artists had integrated perfectly with the community, bringing new energy, while respecting local traditions. In the studio, an improvised exhibition showed the joint work that was already being developed, contemporary photographs, alongside Sarah's historical images, telling the story of that place through different perspectives and times. "Come, come," Mrs. Betty called, waving for everyone to gather. "It's time to light the bonfire." The community formed a circle as the bonfire was lit, its flames dancing against the night sky. Emily lowered her camera for a moment, allowing herself to simply experience that instant. "You know," Mrs. Betty began, her voice carrying the weight of years of wisdom, "when Sarah and Thomas first arrived here, many people didn't understand. They thought it was strange for a couple to leave city life to live in the mountains, make art, pursue a different dream." She paused, her eyes finding Emily and Michael. "But they taught us that sometimes it takes courage to follow your heart, and look at what that courage created, a place where art and life mix, where old and new stories meet." Mrs. Betty's words touched something deep in Emily. She thought about her own journey, about how she had arrived there seeking solitude and found much more: purpose, community, renewed love. One of the resident artists, Marina Sanders, approached with her camera. "Emily, can I take a photo of you two? This moment needs to be documented." Emily hesitated for an instant. She was so used to being behind the camera that she had almost forgotten what it was like to be on the other side of the lens. Michael noticed her hesitation and took her hand, gently pulling her close to the bonfire. "Sometimes," he whispered in her ear, "we need to let others tell our story." With the heat of the bonfire warming their faces and the starry sky above, Emily and Michael posed for the photo. Not an artificial or studied pose, but a genuine moment of shared happiness. "Did you know I found another letter from Sarah?" Emily commented later as they danced to the sound of soft music. It was different from the others written years later. In it, Sarah said that the true miracle wasn't finding this place, but finding the courage to stay, to build something meaningful. Michael twirled her gently in the dance, the reflection of the bonfire flames dancing in his eyes. "And what do you think about that?" Emily smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I think I finally understand what she meant. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't setting out in search of something new, but recognizing when you've already found your place in the world." A year passed since that 4th of July night. The Mountain Arts Center, as the project became known, had transformed into a vibrant hub of creativity and connection. Sarah's old studio, now carefully restored and expanded, housed a constant succession of artists, photographers, and dreamers who came in search of inspiration. Emily was in her office at the studio, organizing the last photographs for the book she was about to launch, a work that documented not only the transformation of the space, but also the stories of the people who were part of it. On the wall behind her desk, the photograph taken by Marina on the night of the celebration occupied a special place, next to the historical portrait of Sarah and Thomas. "Are you ready?" Michael asked, entering the office. "Guests are beginning to arrive for the gallery inauguration." Emily smiled, closing her laptop. The new gallery was the latest addition to the complex, a space dedicated to exhibitions that united contemporary art and local memory. The first show would be special. A retrospective of Sarah Montgomery's work, along with contemporary photographs documenting the continuation of her legacy. "I can hardly believe we've come this far," Emily commented, standing up to adjust Michael's tie. Even having stepped away from the executive presidency of the company, he still maintained a natural elegance, now combined with a serenity he didn't possess before. "Actually," he replied, taking her hand, "I think we were always walking towards this moment. Each choice, each missed connection, each decision brought us exactly where we needed to be." Together, they went down to the garden, where a diverse crowd was gathering. Resident artists chatted animatedly with local residents. Journalists circulated asking questions, and at the center of it all, Mrs. Betty commanded a team serving traditional treats from the region. Sophie was also there, now a more constant presence in their lives. The reconciliation process had been gradual but genuine. She had become one of the greatest advocates of the project, using her media contacts to publicize the work. being developed in the mountains. "Attention, everyone," Michael called, climbing onto a small, improvised stage. "Before we officially open the gallery, Emily has something special to share." Emily joined him on the stage, her heart beating strongly with the emotion of the moment. "When I arrived at these mountains a year ago," she began, "I was looking for a place to hide from the world. Instead, I found a place to create a new world." She paused, her eyes scanning the familiar faces in the audience. Sarah Montgomery once wrote that true art is not just in capturing moments, but in creating spaces where new moments can flourish. This place, this project is living proof of that truth. A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Emily continued, "The gallery we inaugurate today is not just a space for exhibitions. It's a testimony that dreams have no expiration date, that love knows no limits of time, and that sometimes the greatest new beginnings happen exactly where our story began." Michael took her hand, and together they cut the ribbon that officially inaugurated the gallery. As the guests entered to admire the exhibition, Emily remained for a moment in the garden, watching the sun set behind the mountains she now called home. She took her camera, framing the exact moment when the last rays of sunlight pierced the clouds, creating a spectacle of light and shadow. It was an image that perfectly captured everything they had built, a place where past and present met, where art and life intertwined, where love and purpose walked side by side. Somewhere, she knew, Sarah was smiling. 3 months after the gallery inauguration, the Mountain Arts Center had become a cultural phenomenon. Artists from all over the country competed for spots in the artistic residencies, and the waiting list grew every day. Emily, however, remained faithful to her original vision, to preserve authenticity and genuine connection to the place. On a particularly busy morning, she found Michael in the studio garden, where he was examining plans for a new expansion of the space. "Guess what I found?" she said, sitting down beside him with an old envelope in her hands. "I was organizing Sarah's archives and discovered something amazing." The envelope contained a detailed project for an art school in the mountains. Sarah had drawn every detail: outdoor classrooms, spaces for practical workshops, lodgings integrated with nature. It was surprisingly similar to what they were building now. "It's incredible how dreams can cross generations," Michael commented, studying the drawings. "It's as if Sarah has been guiding us all along." "And that's not all," Emily continued, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Mrs. Betty told me that several children from the region have shown interest in learning photography. They observe the resident artists working, asking questions, wanting to participate." Michael smiled, recognizing the gleam in Emily's eyes. It was the same one she had when a new idea was taking shape. "I was thinking," she proceeded, "what if we created an educational program? Something that would unite the knowledge of the resident artists with the enthusiasm of local children. We could start with photography classes, but expand to other art forms as well." "Like a community art school," Michael completed, already visualizing the possibilities. Exactly as Sarah dreamed. At that moment, they were interrupted by animated voices. A group of local children was approaching, led by Mary, Mrs. Betty's granddaughter, who proudly carried an old camera. "Aunt Emily," Mary called, running in her direction. "Look what Grandma gave me. It was Miss Sarah's. She kept it all these years. Can you teach me how to use it?" Emily carefully took the camera. It was a model similar to what Sarah used in her first photographs in the mountains. Destiny, once again, seemed to weave its invisible connections. "Of course I can, Mary," Emily replied, exchanging a significant look with Michael. "In fact, I think we can do much more than that." The children gathered around her, curious and enthusiastic, as Emily began to explain the basic principles of photography. Michael observed the scene with a smile, remembering how he had fallen in love with her years ago, precisely for her ability to share her passion for art in such a natural and engaging way. "You know," he commented later, when they were alone, "again, I think I finally understood why this place is so special. It's not just for the natural beauty or the rich history. It's because here, dreams have no expiration date. They just pass from one generation to another, growing and transforming." Emily smiled, picking up her camera to capture the sunset that was beginning to paint the sky. Like a photograph that never stops developing, she completed, as the click of the shutter echoed softly in the peace of the afternoon. The first day of class at the newly inaugurated Sarah Montgomery School of Arts dawned with a soft mist covering the mountains. Emily was in the old studio, now transformed into a vibrant educational space, organizing materials for her first photography class. The walls, once empty, now displayed a visual timeline, starting with Sarah's historical photographs, passing through records of the space's transformation until reaching the first photos taken by young students during experimental workshops. "Nervous?" Michael asked, entering the studio with 2 cups of coffee. "Anxious," she corrected, accepting the cup. "It's as if we're closing one cycle and starting another at the same time." The sound of animated voices began to fill the space. The first students were arriving, a mixture of children and teenagers from the region, along with some adults who had decided to explore their artistic side. Among them, Sophie, who after much hesitation had signed up for photography classes. "It's never too late to start over, is it?" Sophie commented timidly, approaching Emily. "Never," Emily confirmed with a genuine smile, handing her a camera. The inaugural class was more than a simple introduction to photography. Emily shared Sarah's story, talked about how art had the power to transform lives and places, about how each photograph was an opportunity to see the world with new eyes. "Photography is not just about capturing moments," she explained to her attentive class. "It's about creating connections, preserving memories, building bridges between past and future." During the practical exercise, Emily observed with emotion how each student found their own perspective, their unique way of framing the world. Mary, especially, demonstrated a natural talent with Sarah's old camera. At the end of the afternoon, as the students shared their first photos, Michael gathered everyone in the garden for a special announcement. "Today marks not only the beginning of classes," he began. "It's also the day we officially expand the project. Starting next month, the Mountain Arts Center will become a foundation. All profits will be reinvested in scholarships and community programs." The news was received with enthusiastic applause. Emily, who didn't know about the announcement, looked at Michael with surprise and love. He had perfectly understood the spirit of the place. It wasn't about profit or recognition, but about creating opportunities and preserving a legacy. Later, after everyone had gone, Emily and Michael walked to the viewpoint near the studio. The sun was setting on the horizon, creating a spectacle of colors that no camera could completely capture. "You know what moves me the most?" Emily said, leaning against Michael's chest as they observed the landscape. "It's thinking that decades from now other people will find our photographs, our stories, just as we found Sarah's, and maybe they'll also find here the courage to follow their own dreams." Michael gently kissed the top of her head. "And so the cycle continues," he murmured. Emily picked up her camera one last time that day, not to photograph the landscape or the sunset, but to capture her reflection and Michael's in the studio window, their silhouettes cut against the colorful sky, their hands intertwined, their serene smiles. It was a simple image, but one that told a complete story of love, of art,